Tonight, they put him in the White House. Now, President Obama is trying desperately to win back struggling middle-class Americans in a critical election year. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the latest on Haiti. As the U.S. Army struggles to fix the infrastructure there, preparations are underway for an influx of refugees here. CBS News exposed at a congressional junket to the climate summit in Copenhagen. Now we can tell you how much it costs taxpayers as we follow the money. And Steve Hartman travels halfway around the world and finds the Waltons.
4 generations, not only under one roof, but sharing one bank account.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. He got the message. It's the economy middle-class voters are most worried about. And with critical congressional elections coming up this year, President Obama today rolled out a series of proposals designed to show he's on the case. Chip Reid is at the White House tonight. And Chip, this is just the latest example of Obama 2.0 reaching out to voters on Main Street.
Well, that's right, Katie. The president really is at the low point of his presidency right now, and today he turned his attention to the middle class to try to stop his downward slide.
Unfortunately, the middle class has been under assault for a long time.
Positioning himself as the defender of average Americans, the president today outlined a series of measures to ease their burden. The proposals include nearly doubling the child care tax credit for families making less than $85,000 a year, expanding tax credits to help workers save for retirement, and increasing support for families caring for elderly relatives. The White House says that will help the so-called sandwich generation, families struggling to support children and parents at the same time. The measures are not intended to create jobs, but to ease the pain.
The president is waiting for the economy to turn around, and in the interim, the best that can happen for him is that people see that he's on the case, that he's working for them.
Republicans scoffed at the proposals. House Republican leader John Boehner said the American people don't need more photo ops, they need new policies that create jobs. The new measures are a preview of the president's primetime State of the Union address this Wednesday, in which jobs will be at the top of his agenda. Critics say it's about time. A new poll shows the economy and jobs are Americans' top priorities, far ahead of health care, which is in 8th place.
Too many Americans.
The president today insisted his stimulus plan is creating jobs, but polls show most Americans don't believe it. One reason may be the sometimes muddled message coming out of the White House.
The Recovery Act saved thousands and thousands of jobs.
1.5 million jobs. Saved more than 2 million jobs.
The message is also a bit muddled on health care reform. The president still wants to get it through Congress, but no one's been able to figure out a way to do it. Katie?
And won't it have to be far less ambitious now, Chip?
Well, the message muddled there too, Katie. There are some here at the White House and on Capitol Hill who believe they can still ram through the president's plan, but there are many Democrats on the Hill who say no way, it's going to have to be scaled way back.
Chip Reid. Chip, thanks very much. One reason for the president's shift in gears is voter anger over bailouts. Today, General Motors interim CEO Ed Whitaker reaffirmed that GM will pay back more than $6 billion in U.S. government loans by June. And interim is being dropped from his title. He's got the job. Meanwhile, Sandra Hughes tells us today was the deadline for GM and Chrysler dealers who lost their businesses to file for arbitration to try to win them back.
8 months ago, car dealer Steve Busjager gave his sales force a pep talk. It was the day after Chrysler went into bankruptcy.
This is probably the best thing that could have happened.
But when Chrysler and GM went to Washington begging for a bailout, the terms of bankruptcy meant dealerships had to close.
So this was your showroom.
This was my showroom, yes.
Now it's completely empty.
It is.
With no explanation, Busjager was shut down along with 788 other Chrysler dealers. GM wants 2,000 dealers closed by October. Busjager laid off 44 employees and lost about $1 million.
I'm still very bitter, and it's just not right what happened.
Now Busjager and others may get a new lease on life. Congress ordered the automakers to set up an arbitration process to reinstate some closed dealerships.
The first thing would be to show them that the process was perhaps arbitrary or unfair, or that perhaps another dealer was, quotes, a worse dealer and didn't get terminated.
But from coast to coast, many say they're facing impossible odds.
It's kind of like a little bit of an insult.
In New York, former Chevy dealer Fred DeRisi says he can't afford to appeal.
To procure the land and to build a new facility, it would cost $5 million.
Busjager estimates he'll spend $100,000 to make his case. Even then, he doesn't trust Chrysler.
I don't think Chrysler wanted to do it at all. I think they feel they had to do it.
He could be right. Chrysler's CEO recently said the company may go to court to try to slam the brakes on arbitration. GM likely won't.
We'll just have to examine this and see the circumstances under which they were terminated.
So far, more than 1,300 of those terminated dealers say they'll fight back. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Glendale, California.
One more economic note tonight. America's Realtors report sales of used homes plunged nearly 17% in December. That is the biggest one-month drop in more than 40 years. The rush to take advantage of a tax credit for first-time buyers apparently came to an end. Now to Haiti, where it's been nearly 2 weeks since the earthquake. The death toll is estimated at 200,000, and the government says 150,000 people have been buried in mass graves. The Canadian government, meanwhile, hosted an international conference in Montreal today to start planning the country's recovery. The Haitian Prime Minister was there. He said it could take a generation to rebuild Port-au-Prince. As Bill Whitaker tells us, they're taking some steps already.
To see crowds growing and pushing outside the U.S. Embassy in Port-au-Prince,
stop pushing!
You'd think the biggest job for America's military and diplomats is handling the tears and tempers
They're not telling me anything
of people desperate to get to U.S. shores. But their biggest concern, getting this country that's been knocked to its knees back on its feet. The first order of business, infrastructure repair.
Top 5 is the port, the airfield, the electrical grid, the road system, and the water system as well.
The American military built this new control tower at the airport. Since Sunday, 160 planes land a day instead of 30. It repaired one of the capital's damaged docks. Now 150 containers a day unload.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Sergeant First Class Jason Jacot is helping turn the lights back on in Port-au-Prince. Electricity has been down since the quake.
Are they at zero?
Right now they're at 0, sir. But they are making progress. They're going to try and put a transmission line on tonight.
Then there's the massive job of rebuilding. Even with world governments focused on Haiti and private charitable giving nearing $500 million, there's no end to suffering in sight. Just cleaning debris from Port-au-Prince will take at least a year. Then there's housing for the estimated 1 million homeless Haitians. No one is under any illusions.
The reconstruction of Haiti will take years. There's no doubt about that.
Relief agencies have a rush order for 100,000 tents, a temporary solution to get Haitians off the streets before the spring rains. Katie?
Bill Whitaker reporting from Port-au-Prince tonight. The U.S., of course, has a special bond with Haiti. More than 500,000 Haitian immigrants live here, as many as 125,000 of them illegally. Now, Kelly Kobayea tells us communities all across the country are preparing to welcome many more Haitian refugees.
It's the middle of the school year in Florida. Francesco. But for 13-year-old Francesco Sai, it's only day 2.
My new friends call me the Haiti survivor.
Francesco is one of 7 quake survivors at this massive middle school in Weston, Florida. His parents drove across the border from Haiti to the Dominican Republic so he could be someplace safe and stable.
Thinking about the earthquake, the shock I got, I really don't want to go back.
Cash-strapped school districts in South Florida have absorbed more than 175 children like Francesco, many of whom have U.S. passports or relatives here. How many can you handle?
As many as we can. As many come to us, we'll handle it.
Hundreds?
Yes, I think that we would handle it.
Retired teachers are being asked back, and grief counselors are ready to help.
What's your name?
The Archdiocese of Miami is drafting a plan to fly hundreds, perhaps thousands here. It's called Operation Pierre Pan, after the Pedro Pan flights in the 1960s, when Cubans opposed to the revolution sent more than 14,000 of their children to the United States.
I'm absolutely convinced that it's going to happen.
For now, the Archdiocese is trying to help the thousands of Haitians already in the U.S. As many as 200,000 are expected to apply for temporary protective status, an 18-month reprieve from deportation and a permit to work.
It's His glory. It's a glory for all my family.
About 30,000 Haitians were set to be deported before the earthquake. Those people will now be allowed to apply for temporary protective status. Katie?
Kelly Cobier in Miami tonight. Thank you, Kelly. By the way, Friday's telethon Hope for Haiti Now raised $58 million, and pledges continue to come in. By comparison, a similar telethon after 9/11 brought in about $150 million. A benefit for victims of the South Asian tsunami raised about $18 million, and a telethon following Hurricane Katrina, $40 million. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, members of Congress went to Copenhagen and you got the bill. Now we know just how big a bill. We'll follow the money next. Earlier this month, Cheryl Atkinson exposed a congressional junket to the climate conference in Copenhagen, a delegation of more than 100 traveling on your dime. Tonight, we have a better idea of just how many dimes it cost you. Once again, Cheryl follows the money.
There's new light shed on the Copenhagen Climate Summit in Denmark and how much it cost you, thanks to recently filed congressional expense reports. Official filings and our own investigation show at least 106 people from the House and Senate attended. Spouses, a doctor, a protocol expert, and even a photographer. For 15 Democratic and 6 Republican congressmen, food and rooms for 2 nights cost $4,400 tax dollars each. That's $2,200 a day, more than most Americans spend on their monthly mortgage payment.
We asked Congress and staff about whether they're mindful it's public tax dollars they're spending. Many told us they never even see the bills or expense reports.
Congressman Henry Waxman is a key climate change player shown here in Copenhagen. Last week, we asked him about the $2,200 a day bill for room and food.
I can't believe that. I can't believe it, but I don't know.
But there it is, right next to his name in black and white. The group expense report was filed by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She wouldn't talk about it when our producer tried to ask.
Regarding the Copenhagen expense account, Madam Speaker,
Pelosi's office did offer an explanation for the high room charges. Those who stayed just 2 nights were charged a 6-night minimum at the 5-star Marriott. One staffer says they strongly objected to no avail. You may ask how they'll negotiate a climate treaty if they can't get a better deal on hotel rooms. Total hotel, meeting rooms, and a couple of $1,000 a night hospitality suites topped $400,000. Flights weren't cheap either. 59 House and Senate staff flew commercial during the Copenhagen rush. They paid government rates, $5,000 to $10,000 each. Add 3 military jets and the bill tops $1.1 million, not including all the Obama administration officials who attended, well over 60. In fairness, many attendees told us they did a lot of hard work and laid the groundwork for a future global treaty.
It was awfully cold, and I was there because I thought it was important for me to be there. I didn't look at it as a pleasure trip.
But considering the size of the deficit and the fact that no global agreement on climate change was reached, critics questioned the supersized U.S. delegation. More than 165, leaving the impression there's dollars to burn, in this case, more than $1 million. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News, the only news network honored with 2 2010 DuPont Columbia Awards for excellence in broadcast journalism.
Bombers attacked 3 hotels, at least 37 Iraqis. Officials blame Saddam loyalists out to undermine the government. That government has invested heavily in bomb detectors to try to prevent such attacks. But as Richard Roth tells us, there's new evidence they don't work.
If you think the pictures in this promotional video are dramatic, just look at the claims made for the device it promotes. The ADE 651 is a metal antenna on a plastic handle, sold as a bomb detector that uses no batteries or electronics. According to its British distributor, it can point to hidden drugs, guns, or explosives. and it'll work underwater, underground, or in the air. According to the U.S. military, it's completely useless.
I can think of no practical application for this device beyond party entertainment.
Yet the Iraqi government spent at least $85 million for about 2,000 of the so-called bomb detectors and a training program that teaches troops to shuffle their feet to generate static electricity to make the things work. Now, Britain has just banned export of the devices and arrested the businessman who's made a fortune selling them. Jim McCormick, a former policeman, is accused of fraud, but the ADE 651s are defended by Iraqi officials who backed their purchase, and they're still in use.
They're fine for fooling a 4-year-old at a birthday party, but they're immoral if they're trying to supposedly save lives at a checkpoint.
And they're also at checkpoints in Beirut and Amman, Jordan, where the bomb detectors guards are using at this 5-star hotel may provide no more security than a magic wand. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
In other news, an Ethiopian Airlines jetliner with 90 people on board crashed overnight off the coast of Lebanon. A runway camera shows the 737 taking off from Beirut, bound for Ethiopia's capital. Moments later, a bright flash, possibly from an explosion. Lebanese officials say it was not terrorism, but thunderstorms may have been a factor. No survivors have been found. Coming up next, everyone in the world has a story, and you'll hear his in a moment.
Everyone in the World Has a Story is sponsored by Vesicare.
You may remember when Steve Hartman traveled America with the goal of proving that everyone has a story. Tonight, with the help of space-age technology, Steve goes global as he begins a new series, Everyone in the World Has a Story.
0 and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
When CBS News and NASA launched this project to find 3 stories that show us who we really are as a planet.
Solid rocket booster separation.
The first question everyone had was, where on earth do you begin?
All right, ready?
To which astronaut Jeff Williams answered, how about there? His random stab at the globe sending us to India. The tip of his finger falling on a town outside Delhi called Rewari. Rewari is, by India standards, a sleepy little town of just 1 million people.
You guys ready?
It's far enough off the beaten path that many who live here have never seen an American before.
This is the one right here.
Including this gentleman.
Kushi Ram? Kushi Ram.
Who never will see one. Every morning, 78-year-old Kusi Ram Goyal feels his way to work. Before he went blind in his mid-20s, most likely from a parasite, Kusi Ram was a grade school teacher. Now, he mills wheat into flour, grinding out a living of $4 a day.
When I realized this problem would not end, I accepted it in a positive way and thought this is the way God wants me to live.
Still, imagine being blind, going through old age on a low wage in a country like India.
Got a bit of a hole here, little hole.
You'd think that would have to be a hard, lonely life. You'd think. But Kusi Ram Goyal lives quite comfortably.
Should I take my shoes off?
He shares a house with 13 family members.
Oh, okay.
Who welcomed me like their long-lost 14th.
What are they making?
They kept bringing me bread, saying, eat just one more piece. Then I did, and they'd say, eat just one more piece.
You said one!
Kusi Ram's oldest son told me, this is how we show our love. Then insisted I eat yet another.
Oh my gosh.
This is Kusi Ram's wife, Kashmiri. They've been married 57 years.
How did you survive in those early years?
I never saw any problem and was happy to feed our children with whatever little we had.
Kashmiri says her husband took every job he could get to support their family. She was proud of how far they've come and clearly grateful for this opportunity to tell the world.
She's giving you a blessing.
Oh, thank you.
But what impressed me most of all was how this family gets by today. 4 generations, not only under one roof, but sharing one bank account. The oldest son works as a contractor. Another son runs a coffee shop. A grandson sells auto parts, and everything goes into one pot. I also couldn't help but notice how there always seemed to be someone watching Grandpa. Whether he knew it or not, there was always at least one family member just making sure